Everything I say here is my views and my views alone. Other people may share them, some of them, hopefully, many do, but this is my experience and the way I see the problem. There is an Islamist menace. It's been there for a long time. The attack on the United States, 9/11, was of course the big one, the wake-up call. Far from waking us up, all it did really was allow our masters to impose draconian, even more draconian, repressive anti-terrorist law, so-called, and to go ahead with what was obviously a pre-planned program of regime change. Britain, we had 7/7. There was another more recent attack in Manchester, in which an Islamist fanatic carried out an outrage at a concert attended largely by young girls. Excuse the creaking table, it's something I can't avoid. Now we've got this terrible business in the Middle East with October 7th, which the extreme left, well, they never cease to amaze me, but they was good as sided with these monsters, and they are monsters. What is Islamism? Well, Islamism isn't Islam. It's been called Islamofascism. It's a pernicious ideology that uses the mask of Islam, the mask of religion, as have others in the past, and this is totally ruthless. You know, all the talk we've heard about the horrors and of imperialism, colonialism. The reality is that the world is a much better place for imperialism, especially British imperialism and colonialism. Without it, the African would still be living in mud huts, and indeed Africans still are living in mud huts. Islamism it destroys all before it. I say not to confuse this with Islam, because Islam is something very different. My experiences with Islam have been somewhat positive. I was always aware of it from when I was a kid. Like, I knew that you don't draw pictures of Mohammad, Muslims don't eat pork, and don't drink alcohol, theoretically. But I only really became aware of it in 1979, 1980, when I picked up a copy of Banking Without Interest by Nejatullah, Mohammad Siddiqi. I wrote to the author a while back. I never had a reply. He died last year, late last year. At that time, I was, well, immersed in a different type of ideology, but I noticed distinct similarity between the programme of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which was written by Gottfried Feder, and that was breaking of thraldom of interest. And this is what Islam does. What Islamic banking, as far as it exists, as far as it hasn't been corrupted, it takes out usury. Incredibly, I've seen idiots claim that Islam is primitive, barbaric, superstitious, whatever, because it doesn't endorse usury. Usury is the main reason we are in this mess. banks creating money out of thin air and selling it to governments, to corporations, to individuals. And of course it's a Ponzi scheme. There's more debt in the world than money. Islamic banking is the solution for that. Later I became involved with the Islamic Party of Britain, which doesn't really exist anymore. The website's still up. When I was in prison in 1997, I was arrested November 1st, 1996. It was 1997. I had two visitors from the party sent me by David Peacock, who's now deceased. Both white converts. Something which is forgotten, or perhaps never known, is that Islam was imported into these islands by white converts. There have been small numbers of Muslims here since Elizabethan times, if not before that. But it was really white converts that started the ball rolling. There was a bloke named Quilliam who founded the first mosque in Liverpool. The same year there was another one founded in Woking, near Woking. The Quran was the first proper translation of the Quran into English was by Marmaduke Pickthall, another white convert. There's so much crap being written about Islam that it's not this clash of civilizations garbage. Islam has a lot in common with English tradition, if you like. I mean, there's a strong temperance tradition here. Scotland, I believe, has more alcoholics and more teetotalers than any other country of the Union, percentage-wise. Homosexuality is a big thing in Islam. It's haram, definitely haram. Well, guess what? Homosexuality was haram in Britain as well, up until the so-called Wolfenden reforms. And in fact, two men who engaged in homosexual acts were executed in Britain as recently as 1835, and men were given prison sentences long after that. Oscar Wilde, although he actually tried for perjury, he was a rather depraved character who was virtually worshipped by today's degenerates like Stephen Fry. Yes, I did say degenerates like Stephen Fry. As I say, I've had rather positive experiences with Islam. This photograph was taken by my tech guy on December 20th, 2013. He's an Indian Muslim. It's myself with my colleague Mark Taha. He's the ugly one without the beard. Any resemblance to the Cray twins is purely accidental. I've done quite a few Muslims in my life. Now, what's happening is this? People like Tommy Robinson are trying to sell us this grand Islamic conspiracy. As I say, there is a big problem. It has to be rooted out. We have to boot out people who weren't born here and have no business being here, and people who were born here, like that little monster Samira Begum, whatever her name is, Begum. They have no business here, well, regardless of where they were born. So what's happening? There's a lot of, how can I put it? There are a lot of people online who spend most of their time attacking Islam and making a living out of it, some of them. This is facilitated because a lot of the Muslims who post online are clowns, like Ali Dawa, for example. I won't name any more, but he's one of the big ones. and these people focus on them. There's something called the 1% rule. I'll put a link to my video, What is Gaslighting 2, down below, and that explains the 1% rule. And the way it's usually applied to so-called white nationalists, but it's applied to Muslims as well. People who spend all their time attacking Islam are many and varied. There are ex-Muslims. There's a guy named Apostate Aladdin who's probably a faggot. There's the self-styled apostate prophet, a guy named Ridvan, who is an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm a lifelong atheist, so I've got no problem with that. But he hates Islam so much he's teamed up with a guy named David Wood, who is a Christian. Has rather interesting history for a Christian. And there's Jay Smith, who was a Christian apologist, who was born in India, actually. And these people, there's a lot more, but they spend all their time trashing Islam. Islam has a rather bizarre history. There is some, how can I put it? Some people believe the Prophet Muhammad didn't exist, and others believe he did exist, but well, the things are claimed of him, and the big one, of course, is his marriage to Aisha. How true is that? Well, he was also married to 9 or maybe 12 other women, and he was supposed to have visited them all every night. Seriously. The reality is that whether or not he existed, Muhammad has become a mythical figure. People in their own time have become, Adolf Hitler is the big one, of course. Jimmy Savile has become a mythical figure. The innocent Jimmy Savile, I'll put a link to that below as well. All sorts of nonsense. I mean nowadays, of course, we've got not just the internet but social media, so anybody can start a rumour or a lie and it spreads around the world in no time at all. That happened in the ancient world as well. Of course, it was slower, but no less pernicious. People like Wood and Ridvan spend all their time, say, trashing Islam, pointing to, like they ridicule it. I mean, Islam is like all religions. It's a revealed truth. Do you believe that Muhammad flew up to heaven on a horse and bargained with God himself about the number of prayers his followers would say every day? 50 down to 5? No, obviously not. But that's revealed truth. People believe it because they want to believe it. Ridiculous as that sounds, as David Wood would have us believe it sounds, is it any more ridiculous than the idea that God impregnated a virgin, that Jesus raised the dead, rose from the dead himself, that he fed a crowd with a basket full of, well, 5 loaves and 2 fish, that he turned water into wine, that he walked on water? All this is, people believe this because they want to believe it. Having said that, check out the Big Bang Theory and see how ridiculous that sounds, especially as it's now been more or less debunked. I'll put a link to that below as well. Islam, as practiced by mainstream Muslims, is very different from this Islamist garbage. The country with the largest Islamic population is Indonesia, and there's very little trouble there. There was some bombing a while back of Australians, the Bali bombing, but they target regular Muslims as well. Muslims are probably the biggest victims of Islamism. Now, coming to October 7th, this was an absolute outrage, and really we've been conned. I know a lot about the history of Zionism, and I don't fall for any of that crap about the so-called war of liberation, yada yada yada. the Israeli War of Independence. No such thing. Yes, the Palestinians have had a raw deal, but you know, back at the time of Cast Lead, Operation Cast Lead, I heard, I think it was Chris Hedges, that imbecile, saying that this is one side that has an army, there's no army on the other side. Well, we've seen of late that Hamas has built tunnels in Gaza which put the London Underground to shame. This is a network used exclusively for military purposes. They'll come up from the tunnels and murder people, basically. They've used civilians as shields, and if the Israelis bomb Gaza back to the Stone Age, it's Hamas, it's the fall of Hamas, because what else could they do? Remember what the guy said? There will be another October 7th and another and another and another. What are they meant to do? And we're all under threat. As I say, they've bombed here. There've been literally tens of thousands of terrorist outrages by Islamists. A while back there were 3 homosexuals murdered in a Reading park by some nutter. There was one who went mad in France and attacked kids in a playground. This is their mentality. Whether they're organised terror groups, terror cells or lone wolves. They'll kill Jews, they'll kill us all. And this is really an ideology that has to be stamped out. And, you know, I mean, obviously we don't want any more state repression, but the state must do everything in its power to stop this, and that includes illegal immigration. With regard to Mr. Robinson and company, they made a big thing about, a lot of people made a big thing about the grooming gangs. This isn't an Islamic thing, because under Islam proper, rape is capital. The idea that women are second or third class citizens in Islamic countries is complete garbage. I seem to remember that Pakistan had a female prime minister a while back. She was assassinated. But women hold positions of power and positions of scientists and stuff in Islamic. Sorry about this. It's a chair now. In Islamic countries where they study STEM instead of gender studies, garbage like that. Is there an Islamic invasion of Europe? Well, we have to stop the Islamist invasion of Europe. As regards to Muslims, most Muslims being a subversive force. Well, let's take a look at some of them. Yeah? The Americans have Ilhan Omar. Here she is. The British have Siddiqi Khan. Here he is. This is really par for the course. A lot of Muslims are just really nominal Muslims. There have been big outbreaks of atheism in Pakistan and Christianity in Iran. Most people just want to get on with their lives, and that does not include pushing this pernicious ideology. The extreme left and their enormously wealthy financial backers are a bigger threat, if not a bigger threat. They're in the process of destroying America with illegal immigration and repressive laws. But we have to take a stand against the Islamo-fascist menace, because we can't have, this insanity can't go on, and we have to stamp it out, basically. And that's going to be painful. What the Israelis are doing is painful, but it's necessary. I hate to say it, if you see my CV with regard to Zionism, you'll understand how painful it is for me to say, but it needs to be done, because it's us or them.